Welcome, dear listener, to a gentle voyage into the world of Sparta, where discipline was elevated to its highest art, where lives were forged in the crucible of relentless challenge, and where glory and hardship merged into a timeless saga. Hear the echo of a sudden lash against bare skin, and sense the hollow hunger of a simple meal of coarse barley gruel. In these moments of austerity, you will come to understand not only the rigors that shaped a warrior's soul, but also the threads of courage, intrigue, and sacred ritual woven through Spartan life. I am your historian guide, inviting you to step softly through the threshold of antiquity. Today, we will not race toward epic battles or dazzling tales of the famed 300. Instead, we'll pause at the very gates of a Spartan village. Imagine a 7-year-old boy, trembling with both fear and resolve, as he parts from his family to enter the agoge, the cornerstone of Greece's most formidable society. Feel the chill of the stone underfoot. Allow your mind to settle into each whispered detail, each distant clatter, each breath of history gently unfurling before you. Beneath the soft glow of our shared lantern, we will dust off the pages time has forgotten and peer into a world where every triumph was hard-won, every pain held purpose. Now, make yourself comfortable, take a slow, deep breath, and let us journey together through the echoes of Sparta. Why it sucks to be a Spartan. From age 7, you awaken before the first pale tendrils of dawn have crept across the sky. Your body lies atop a thin reed mat, mere strangers by birth but bound by circumstance to the same austere fate. A single horn's call, low and resonant, draws every eye and every body into motion. Your heart hammers not with fear alone, but with the raw recognition that each day here is a trial you will not escape. You rise, muscles trembling, and fall into line behind an older boy whose shoulders are already performing the practiced rigidity the instructors demand. You have endured enough to have forgotten what comfort felt like. Yet the lessons shift swiftly. You are summoned to a narrow hall where benches flank a long wooden table. There, a single bowl of barley gruel is passed in silence. In a dimly lit chamber, you and a small circle of peers are presented with a scroll bearing the unwritten laws of Sparta. For a full hour, you must commit each line to memory without error. The lingering sting of pain and the quiet echo of orders will follow you, reminders that here, comfort is the true enemy, and suffering is the forge of honor. In the days to come, you will learn to crave this harsh routine, for it is the very essence of being Spartan, knowing that a single misstep will bring the lash once more. As ink fades in your mind and letters blur before your eyes, you realize that in Sparta, the true enemy is not another warrior, but the weakness within yourself. Spooned out by a gaunt attendant whose eyes never meet yours, you swallow slowly, mindful that each mouthful is a lesson. Scarcity breeds focus, and discomfort sharpens the spirit. The gruel is lukewarm, gritty with husks, and filling it is not your goal, surviving it is. A line of helot tokens of the subjugated class stands watchfully at the far end. Your next assignment: track one of them through tangled scrub and shallow ravines. You tear through thorny undergrowth, your cloak snagged like a wounded bird. You collapse onto your brittle reed mat, every joint protesting the day's cruelty. Round you, other boys lie silent, some exhausted into unconsciousness, others simply still, their minds too raw for rest. As darkness closes in, you feel a fragile spark of pride deep within your chest. You have endured. You have not yet become the spear-bearing warrior of legend, but you have survived one more day in the crucible of Sparta, only to find the helot waiting with an impassive gaze. The instructor demands a demonstration of control, and you must subdue him without killing, an impossible paradox of power and restraint that leaves your knuckles raw and your mind reeling. You share nothing with them but the cold floor, and the knowledge that sleep is an indulgence swiftly reclaimed by the agoge. There is no whispered greeting, no murmured comfort, only the unspoken bond of collective expectation, an invisible thread that draws you all forward. Your tunic sticks to your skin like a second carcass. Every movement is a negotiation between pain and necessity. The instructor watches from a raised platform, arms folded, ready to call those deemed unfit. Each grunt, each slide of flesh against clay, becomes a testament to your burgeoning tenacity. Laid directly upon cold stone that soaks the night's chill into your bones, the air is heavy and silent, save for the distant drip of condensation off the arched ceiling. As you push yourself upright, a sharp pang of stiffness greets each movement, your limbs still learning the language of pain, an endurance that this place demands. Around you, more than 50 other boys lie in identical rows. At a signal most faint, you hear the scrape of sandals on stone. The courtyard lies just beyond a low threshold. Gray light seeps in from an open archway, revealing instructors stationed like sentinels. Their faces are half hidden beneath angled cloaks, their eyes cold slits of appraisal. You swallow hard, tasting the grit of dust on your tongue, and step forward. With each footfall, you feel the weight of a silent question press upon you. Will you falter, or will you become one of them unyielding, unbroken? The first task is simple in theory. Run the length of the courtyard carrying a wooden shield, carved to mimic the heft of bronze. In practice, it is an exercise in self-betrayal, for your arms burn, and your breath comes in ragged gasps before you cover half the distance. Behind you, an instructor's voice, a single, razor-sharp word orders you to drop the shield and repeat. On the third attempt, when you stumble and the wood crashes in a splintering thud, you taste blood in your mouth as a cane snaps across your back. There is no malice there, only an exacting discipline that brooks no mercy. By the time the sun's first warmth kisses the courtyard stones, at midday, the hunger begins its chisel-like work on your resolve. The afternoon brings wrestling in mud pits, a mock battle meant to strip away all sense of dignity. Then comes the final trial before dusk, a test of mental endurance. Finally, when twilight's cool breath replaces the day's harsh glare, you are herded back to the stone hall, and as you drift toward uneasy sleep, beyond it lies no man's land, scrubland riddled with thorn bushes, rocky outcrops, and the faint traces of ancient footpaths. You tighten your cloak, take a slow breath, and step across. At times, you drift close to a shuttered cottage, its wooden doors sealed against winter's chill. Inside, families must huddle under straw mattresses, children clinging to one another. You serve, and the life you take are intertwined in a silent oath older than Sparta itself. Your pulse hammers, the world narrows to muscle and reflex. He leaps, dropping his sack, and races across an open field, breath trailing behind him like smoke. You sheath your knife and begin the solitary march back to camp. The air smells of wild thyme and dust, but your senses are numb. Behind you, the helot's lifeless form lies half hidden in thorny brush, a silent testament to the price paid for Spartan supremacy. The Cryptia has marked you, not just as a warrior, but as a guardian of the state's unyielding will. And as you close your eyes against the glare of lantern light, the echo of your quarry's final breath follows you into an uneasy sleep, reminder that beneath every Spartan's shield lies a shadow that can never be fully banished. Ahead, the city gates gleam with promise of warmth, comradeship, and if you dare to hope absolution, you sprint to, cloak flapping, boots skimming stones. The blade finds its mark with a muted thud. In the barracks, heads turn at the clink of your blade against worn stone. The oldest among you nods solemnly, as if the deed itself carries more weight than words could ever express. You collapse onto your reed mat, muscles slack, mind whirling. Beneath the hush of morning prayers, you catch yourself wondering, was this your triumph or your loss? And time cracks open in an instant of viscous clarity. The helot collapses. You stand over him, breathing hard, the hush of dawn settling around you, echoing the ancient drumbeats of your childhood drills. The endless lessons that taught you suffering is the path to honor. You step forward, blade raised, and then hesitate. A bird's call shatters the tension, and the helot snaps his head up, eyes wide with terror, oblivious to the danger just beyond their walls. You imagine their dreams, simple hopes for plentiful harvest or a visit from a distant relative. Such innocence feels like a betrayal to your Spartan code. Better to remind them of their place in this world. At the bottom, in that moment, the safety of Sparta recedes behind you like a dream fading at dawn. Bent double as he carries a sack of olives to a storage hut. His movements are cautious, but hunger compels him to risk these pre-dawn hours. You watch him for several heartbeats, the wool cloak slipping from shoulder to shoulder as he walks, not for conquest or survival of Sparta itself, but as a lesson in absolute obedience. You glance down at the blood-smudged blade, wonder if the crimson will ever wash away, not from steel, but from memory. You lift your blade, raising it just enough to feel its weight, the promise of power tingling at your fingertips. He pressed a short blade into your hand, its edge dull but purpose sharp. Your senses heighten. Every rustle of grasses sounds like a fleeing helot. Each distant crack of a twig could be an instructor's signal or the snap of a branch. Under a solitary foot, you crouch low, pressing your cheek against damp earth, counting your own breaths as if they might betray your position. Time stretches indefinitely, measured only by the rhythm of your pulse. You swallow, picturing the helot servants sleeping in crowded hovels beyond the city walls, unaware that tonight their existence itself is the quarry. Passes slowly, his tunic patched in places, a leather pouch at his side. You freeze, muscles trembling. He pauses, glances down the path, then continues. Relief washes through you like a cool breeze. Yet in Sparta, mercy is a weakness, and so you train your mind to see every shadow as opportunity, every sleeper as a potential test of your mastery over fear. No torches line the path, only the faint glimmer of distant stars to guide your feet. Tonight, you will enter the Cryptia, Sparta's most secretive rite, a night-long hunt that will test not only your strength, but the very core of your soul. Your instructor's final words linger in your mind as the shadows claim you. Remember, you are both predator and prey. Reaching the outer perimeter, you pause at a shallow trench carved into the earth. The first hours are a study in controlled panic. Suddenly, a lantern's glow flickers on the ridge above. A helot guard, patrolling in pairs, hours pass in this tense ballet. It is not until the eastern sky begins to bleed faint pink that you glimpse your quarry, a lone helot. In that instant, the moral struggle clenches at your chest, the life without another thought. You dart from cover for a heartbeat. You feel triumph until the weight of what you've done sinks in, his life extinguished at your hand. As the sun's first rays stain the horizon gold, crossing the trench once more, you feel the world shift. Yet, this is Sparta, a land where childhood ends in darkness, and manhood is forged in the crucible of ruthless trial. The mystery of the Artemis Orthia sanctuary as dawn's first light warms the hills round Sparta. An altogether different kind of echo stirs beneath the earth, one not of marching feet or clashing shields, but of whispered prayers, scarlet-stained stone, and hidden chambers that have slept for centuries. Uncovered a rectangular courtyard bordered by stone benches and marked by a central altar, carved with the silhouette of a bow and quiver, the enduring symbol of Artemis, the huntress and protector. Nearby, dozens of terracotta statuettes of young women and children lay shattered. Every footstep echoes as if in a cathedral, continuing sporadically into the Roman era. Yet no ancient text offers a clear blueprint of what occurred in this shadowed undercroft, leaving us to piece together its story from pottery shards, scorched amphorae handles, and cryptic inscriptions chiseled into the stone. And the hush presses against your ears, inviting imagination to fill the void. In one corner lies a massive stone basin. In Greek script, youthful hands scrawled lines such as, carved with concentric rings that once held water for purification rites, in which adolescent boys were bound and flogged before the altar, their endurance proving their worthiness to join Sparta's elite adult ranks. Pausanias speaks of a wooden statue of the goddess, draped in a fox's skin and perched atop a tall plinth. Literary accounts hint at dire times, plagues, military defeats when more extreme offerings were made. Yet no indisputable burial deposit has been found beneath the sanctuary. You can almost sense the tension between piety and violence, devotion and dread. Orthia herself was both nurturer and punisher, a divine mother wielding whip and bow, employing replicas of wooden altars, lash-tipped whips, and darkened chambers. Help scholars understand why Sparta alone among Greek city-states placed such emphasis on ritualized pain. It was not mere cruelty, but a binding covenant. To survive pain was to earn the right to defend the polis. But in what remains hidden, let the hush of Orthia's vault accompany you. Feel the weight of every whisper, every scrape of chisel, every prayer lost to time. In that lingering quiet, you sense the profound truth at Sparta's core, that to know a society, you must also know its mysteries, those silent chambers where history drinks of darkness before revealing its light. For every lamp-black smear or votive token, there are stories untold, rites half remembered, and the restless question of what lengths a society will go to shape its young. In the absence of definitive answers, the sanctuary stands as both mirror and veil, reflecting the values of a people who prized endurance above all, even as it conceals the deepest currents of fear and faith beneath its shadowed stones. In the quiet of a lab, you see faces flush with adrenaline, eyes wide with equal parts fear and fascination mirroring, in microcosm, what an initiate might have felt 2.5 millennia ago. Volunteers clad in woolen tunics endure measured strikes, while others play the part of officiants. The daylight feels both pure and more distant. The vineyard above remains placid, vines swaying in a gentle breeze. Oblivious to the violent grace of the rites below, you carry with you bronze fragments inscribed with names, shards of lamp-fired clay, and the lingering scent of damp stone artifacts that anchor this mystery in tactile reality. Infrared cameras record tears, screams, and moments of stunned silence, offering fresh insight into the emotional toll such rites might inflict. And in that liminal space, the boundary between symbolic pain and mortal harm blurred into a ritual dance, we are still striving to choreograph. Instead, archaeologists uncover only scattered bones, intermingled with animal remains and stripped of identifiable context. Officers would lash at the statue with whips to remove the skin, testing the youths who scrambled to retrieve the hide. In another, fragments of bone sheep, goat, and in disputed findings, human were recovered, as if dropped by flinching hands. Traces of red ochre staining the steps may have been pigment for anointing wounds or, more grimly, mixed with blood to sanctify the stone. Yet the exact choreography of the ceremony remains elusive, likely drew a line short of spilling citizen blood in sanctuary grounds. Others counter that clandestine burials secretly interred outside formal graveyards might yet lie hidden beyond the excavated area. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed anomalies in unexcavated strata, suggesting further chambers or pits waiting beneath undisturbed soil. Was the fox a symbolic stand-in for the human flesh it represented? Did the boys see this as a sacred duty or a rite to be dreaded, suggesting that Orthia's worship may have encompassed both animal sacrifice and imagining the cries of pain that once echoed here? But in the hush of modern excavations, we also hear the triumph of survivors' boys who withstood lash and laughter alike, emerging baptized in agony yet bonded by shared ordeal. Perhaps, rites more ominous, their delicate features weathered by time. Yet it was the sudden appearance of a narrow stairway, descending into darkness, that captivated his crew, an underground passage, whose purpose would only deepen the sanctuary's enigma. Miniature shields, even tiny iron helmets carefully placed in alcoves along one wall. These votives bear the names of individuals: Phoebos, Eurycles, Zenobia. To hold one of these pin-sized helmets is to feel the heartbeat of a supplicant, offering a fragment of hope or gratitude to the goddess whose favor could mean victory in battle, fertility in marriage, or relief from plague. Each incantation a plea born of fear, devotion, or raw ambition. And for every heartfelt prayer, there lies the darker question: which souls were carried away from this place, never to return? Here, buried just beyond the city's ancient agora, lies the sanctuary of Artemis Orthia, a sacred precinct that was at once home to joyous festivals and dark, blood-soaked rites. Today, we descend into its archaeological mystery, unearthing fragments of ritual, whispers of sacrifice, and the lingering question of what truly transpired in those subterranean vaults. The rediscovery of Orthia's hallowed grounds. For much of the 19th century, travelers to the Peloponnese passed by a humble vineyard on Sparta's eastern slope, scarcely aware that beneath its vines lay the remnants of one of the city's most venerated chapels. It wasn't until French archaeologist Leon Husey and his team arrived in 1878 that systematic excavations began, peeling back layers of soil to reveal marble altars, broken votive offerings, and inscriptions in arcane scripts. On that first season, Husey venturing into the subterranean labyrinth, modern archaeologists, armed with headlamps and laser scanners, now map this descent in meticulous detail. The stairs, cut into living rock, lead to a vaulted chamber barely large enough for a dozen men to stand abreast. The walls are lined with niches, some empty, others still holding bronze lamps whose soot-blackened bases record centuries of flickering flame. Here, beneath the courtyard's sunlit expanse, the air is cool and damp. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal deposits indicates ritual fire ceremonies here as early as the 6th century BCE. Votive offerings and graffiti, voices of the devout. Among the most astonishing finds are hundreds of personal tokens, bronze pins, but perhaps the most intimate voices of Orthia's ancient visitors come from graffiti scratched directly onto the stone. I, Damaris, swear to honor Orthia if she spares my brother's life. May the goddess guide me as I learn to wield my shield. Orthia, grant me strength so my voice does not falter in the chorus. These messages, simultaneously public and deeply personal, reveal a community in constant dialogue with the divine, the rite of the whip, and the young men's trial. Classical historians like Plutarch and Pausanias leave tantalizing hints of initiation ceremonies tied to Orthia rites. Archaeological evidence corroborates this in part. Dozens of unguent jars and oil lamps were found strewn near the altar's base. To approach the stone altar today is to feel a shiver of empathy. The unanswered questions: human sacrifice or heroic symbolism? Perhaps the deepest mystery of all is whether Orthia's rites ever crossed the threshold into actual human sacrifice. Some scholars argue that this absence speaks volumes. The Spartan state, for all its rigor, as you trace your fingers along the altar's pockmarked surface, echoes in the present, reconstructing ritual in the lab in recent decades. Experimental archaeologists have attempted to recreate aspects of the Orthia ceremonies. These reconstructions, though never sanctioned by religious tradition, leaving Orthia's shadow, questions to carry with you as you emerge from the subterranean vault. Yet the true wonder of the sanctuary of Artemis Orthia lies not in what we have found, and so, as you step back into the warm embrace of the morning sun, helot feasts and royal banquets, a taste of Spartan elite life as twilight's final embers fade beyond the Tagetus mountains, you find yourself approaching a world starkly different from the agoge, as cold stones and the cryptea as blood-drenched scrub. The air is warm, tinged with the scent of burning cedar and sweet olive oil. Your footsteps echo across the threshold, in a voice both sonorous and gentle. He announces the first course, a broth simmered slowly with grains of barley, strips of lamb, and wild herbs gathered from Tagetus slopes. The aroma drifts through the hall, earthy and comforting, in cloaks embroidered with silver thread, topped with pomegranate seeds that burst like rubies on the tongue. As the last crumbs are gathered and the music fades, a hush settles once more. You recline back, your body sated, mind drifting between contentment and contemplation. Around you, the hosts rise to offer toasts to Sparta's enduring laws, to the valor of its warriors, and to the delicate web that binds helot labor to elite governance. Each toast is made with a raised goblet, a pause for reflection, and then a gentle clink exchanged with a neighbor. They move with deliberate grace, feet barely touching the marble floor. You are led through a corridor illuminated by oil lamps set into carved niches. The walls here bear frescoes of hunting hounds coursing after hare, of chariots racing across sandy plains, and of Apollo's laurel wreath, a silent reminder of the cultural ideals that Sparta, for all its martial prowess, still revered. As you step back into the cool night air, the distant sounds of the banquet drift behind you, soft laughter and fading song reminding you that in Sparta, even in a society famed for severity, there exists a realm of cultivated repose, arms rising and falling like the tides. Their performance is not for spectacle alone, but for invoking Artemis Orthia as protective spirit over the ruling household. As you watch, the slow undulation of fabric and the dancers' muffled footfalls become almost hypnotic, blurring the line between feast and ceremony, soothing your senses after the agoge's harsh clangor. The bowl is ladled onto a shallow ceramic dish, the steam rising in soft tendrils as you lift the spoon and taste the warm, savory blend. Ceremony and abundance nourish spirits, and as you make your way through the moonlit streets back to the barracks, each footstep carries the echo of two worlds, one of cold discipline, the other of warm indulgence, both essential threads in the tapestry of a city that, in its paradox, remains forever compelling. Each spoonful invites reflection, the richness of well-reared sheep, the resilience of mountain herbs, the patient labor of cooks who understand the power of subtlety. Where a pair of ebony pillars stretches toward a coffered ceiling painted in deep lapis and gold, their melody is unhurried, a lulling weave of plucked strings and wind that threads through conversation like a gentle current. Voices murmur in gentle discussion, the progress of olive groves, the upcoming training regiments for the next cohort of agoge youths, whispers of diplomatic alliances with Argos and Corinth. Even in this refined circle, the pulse of Sparta's martial heart beats quietly under careful guard. Torches set in bronze sconces cast dancing shadows, alongside slices of goat's cheese dusted with crushed mint. These small luxuries, delicacies drawn from modest rural ingredients, are elevated here by thoughtful presentation and the grace of communal consumption. You pass the plate to a neighbor, exchanging polite nods, and feel for a moment that Spartan society, though austere, knows the art of savoring life's simpler pleasures. Illuminating tapestries that depict victorious hunts and stylized lyre players. Its skin glistens like burnished bronze, crisp and fragrant. Beneath it, vine leaves carpet the table, and earthenware bowls hold roasted root vegetables, chickpea stew, and boiled lentils seasoned with garlic and dill. A platter of olives, black calamine and pale green koronaki awaits your tasting, each one a study in subtlety, brine, oil, smoke, and flesh balanced against your teeth. As you partake, laughter rings out, a rare but genuine sound in Sparta echoing off the vaulted ceiling, as comrades and kin share stories of past hunts, near escapes from traitorous helots, and the absurdities found even within a life of rigid order. The hush here is not oppressive, but expectant, an unspoken promise that the coming hours will unfold in measured pageantry, rather than relentless discipline. Before you lies the royal courtyard of Sparta's ruling family, offers you a small goblet of diluted wine infused with cinnamon and honey. The taste is delicate, the warmth of the cinnamon, the gentle bite of the wine, and the lingering sweetness of honeycomb melting on your tongue. You sip slowly, savoring how each flavor blends. Without overwhelming the palate, an afternoon ceremony transformed into liquid grace. The Spartan elite pride themselves on restraint, even in indulgence. A place where luxury and ritual converge beneath polished columns and along mosaic-tiled floors, its edges carved with reliefs of leaping stags and hunting hounds. Cushioned clines, reclining couches, flank either side woven rush seats piled high with cushions dyed in indigo and ochre. You recline on one of these, propping yourself on your left elbow, just as the poets recommend, a posture that speaks of both ease and decorum. Around you, dignitaries settle in, generals with ornate bronze greaves strapped over their tunics, priestesses bearing garlands of fresh laurel, and foreign envoys adorned in silken robes brought from the distant isles of the Aegean. Here, in the hush of evening light, you are invited to peer behind the city's austere facade and witness the lavish banquets reserved for those who govern and those who guide them. You step through an archway carved from pale Laconian marble, a servant, robed in white linen trimmed with crimson braid. At the center of the hall stands a long mahogany table. A herald steps forward with measured steps, unraveling a scroll of papyrus. Between courses, soft music arises, a quartet of kithras and a lone aulos player seated against a tapestry of woven wool. The second course arrives, plates of figs draped in honey and scattered with chopped walnuts. For the main feast, a whole pig roasted on a spit is brought forth. Amid the revelry, a pair of masked dancers appears at the far end of the hall. Finally, the banquet concludes with a modest cheesecake made from ricotta and honey. When at last you stand to depart, this glimpse into royal leisure reveals the yin to Sparta as young, where hardship and trial forge bodies. From Prince to King Leonidas and the Thermopylae campaign under the same unyielding Spartan sun that shaped your childhood, another life was quietly being forged, one destined to stand at history's most fateful mountain pass. This is the story of Leonidas of the Aegeid line, your future king, born into privilege yet bound by the same relentless code you've come to know. His voice is measured, never harsh, but never wavering. He reminds the Gerousia Council of Elders that Sparta's code demands resistance, that yielding to tyranny betrays every Spartan oath. When debate grows heated, he raises a single hand, and calm descends. At last, the decision is made. Sparta will stand with Athens at Marathon and beyond, a royal childhood, tempered in quiet resolve. Sparring with peers whose names have now vanished beneath chiseled marble, young Leonidas questions seating orders at court. Dust rises in lazy clouds as hoplite columns wind through the Salian plains. You smell sweat and bronze and detachments from Arcadia, Megara, and Corinth, perhaps totaling around 7,000 men. Yet these numbers matter less than the conviction. In Leonidas's steady gaze, he issues orders quietly. When a soldier falters under the midday sun, Leonidas kneels, adjusts the man's cuirass, and murmurs reassurance before returning to his stance. Hear the creak of shield straps and the muffled cadence of sandals on dry soil. Scouts return with news of Persian scouts probing mountain passes. Expectations of easy passage feed the invader's confidence. Noted his uncle's lax discipline, a narrow coastal defile bordered by mountains on one side and the sea on the other. The pass is no wider than the span of 10 men shoulder to shoulder, an ideal choke point. Here, a small force might hold an empire at bay. You stand beside the king as he surveys the rocky ridge, inhaling salt-laden breeze and bracing for the clash to come, and devised training regiments that tested even veteran hoplites. In murmurings exchanged by torchlight, some called him headstrong, others predicted greatness. For you, learning side by side, his presence was magnetic. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. He mastered the code of phalanx formation, shoulder to shoulder, shield overlapping shield, each warrior's life resting on his neighbor's steadiness. His instructors noted his natural command of both spear and voice, a quiet authority that set him apart, even among Sparta's finest prospects. You first meet Leonidas as a boy nearly your age. In those early years, he studied tactics by the light of torches. Sparta's elders debated war or appeasement. You observe King Leonidas in council, the flicker of lamplight on his stern features, the quiet pauses before he speaks. Yet Leonidas's true challenge lay ahead, gathering at Thermopylae, the march north in the summer of 480 BCE. You join Leonidas's march northward. The heat is suffocating. Leonidas chooses Thermopylae, the hot gates, to augment your Spartan cohort of 300 elite hoplites. Allied contingents arrive, 700 Thespians, 400 Thebans. The first Persian onslaught. Steel against steel, day one dawns hot and still. Over the ridge, Persian scouts appear in a carpet of light armor and composite bows, moving like an endless tide. As they approach, Leonidas's trumpet sounds a single blast that echoes between mountain walls. You feel the metal of your spear, but press into your palm as the phalanx forms, shields interlocked, spears leveled at waist height. The Persians surge forward, arrow volleys darkening the sun. You taste smoke and grit as feathers and shafts whiz past. Leonidas calls the charge. In unison, you step forward, shields rising to deflect missiles, then lunge with spears, cleaving through lightly armed troops. Their shields are wicker, their armor minimal. Your bronze helm and cuirass ring with each clash. The mountain path echoes with the thud of feet and the impact of steel. Yet Persian numbers overwhelm skill. More enemies swarm the pass, emerging from hidden gullies to flank the main road. The fighting devolves into brutal skirmishes, spear against sword, shield pressed against armor gaps. You hear screams, some triumphant, others cut short. Leonidas rides along the line, offering silent nods, repositioning reserves, reinforcing exhausted brothers. As dusk falls, the Persians withdraw, but the cost is unnerving. Body-worn shields, spear tips bent, and dozens of Spartan allies wounded or dead. Leonidas surveys the field by torchlight, expression inscrutable. He orders field surgeons to tend the injured. Then, when only shadows remain, he gathers you round a small pyre to burn tokens of tomorrow's ration. His words are few. Sleep, for battle's second breath demands sharper steel and surer hearts. Betrayal in the mountains, the turning point on the second morning. A traitorous Greek guide named Ephialtes creeps through mule tracks above the pass, leading a detachment of Persian immortals over the ridge. You spot them at dawn, gold-clad figures, descending a hidden slope like a dream you cannot wake from. A shockwave of realization ripples through the Spartan line. He orders a small rearguard, his personal guard. This is Sparta's stand, he declares. Go, live to tell our tale. Many allies slip away with quiet resignation, but the 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and a handful of Arcadians stand their ground. You feel the stillness before the storm, a moment, weighed by history itself, including you two hold the main pass while he and the remaining Spartans seal the secondary path. With boulders, when your armor cracks, you press on, compelled by something greater than survival. In the end, Leonidas and the last of his 300 lie fallen together, a silent testament to unyielding resolve. Persians flood the pass, but the legend has already been carved into every Spartan heart. You labor under his calm command, muscle and sweat and dust swirling in the pink-tinged sunrise. The Persians, maddened by obstruction, surge like a living sea up the main causeway. You brace against the crush, each breath a blend of iron and sweat. Leonidas orders the surviving hoplites into a tight circle around him. Spears protrude outward in a bristling ring. You take position, heart pounding, sweat mingling with the dew on grass. The Persians' close ranks, arrows raining down, shields splintering under repeated blows. Yet still you stand, primal instinct overriding every ache and fear. Leonidas leads the final counterattack, his crimson cloak flashing in the dawn light, spear whirling in methodical arcs. By midday, the covert passage is blocked, but Persian numbers have doubled. King Leonidas does not flinch. Leonidas turns to the assembled allies. The final charge, immortality through sacrifice. The third day's battle erupts at sunrise. Amid the chaos, you glimpse him twice, once striking down a warrior twice his size, and again, kneeling to drag a wounded comrade to safety. Each time, you feel a surge of inspired ferocity. This is no mere king, but a brother in arms refusing to yield. As the immortals break through a weakened flank, when the spear in your hand falters, you draw your secondary sword. Aftermath and enduring legacy. In the days that follow, you and the handful of survivors carry the tale back to Sparta. Leonidas' sacrifice buys time enough for Greek city-states to unify and eventually repel Xerxes' invasion at Salamis and Plataea. Each telling of the stand at Thermopylae grows in grandeur, yet you remember the clay-dusted stones, the echo of steel, and the quiet words of your king. Mullen Labe, come and take them. Back home. An anonymous poet composes an epitaph at Leonidas's grave. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. These words echo through millennia, invoking not only the might of Sparta's warriors, but the unbreakable will of a people who held the world at bay for 3 fateful days. In this segment, you have walked in Leonidas's sandals, felt the burden of kingship, the heat of battle, and the sacred duty to defend Sparta at all costs. As you close your eyes tonight, let the memory of those rocky slopes, that tight phalanx, and that crimson cloak drift you gently into sleep, whispering of sacrifice, brotherhood, and the enduring power of resolve. The promise of the Kleros at the heart of Sparta. As social contract stood the Kleros, a parcel of territory, carved from the conquered lands of Messenia and Arcadia after the 8th and 7th centuries BCE, leaning on a sturdy wooden staff as he surveys fertile fields of barley and flax. He owns the harvest, which he entrusts to Helot laborers, and in return, he devotes his days to training, council meetings, and the camaraderie of the mess hall. This tidy arrangement land for swordsmanship was the cornerstone of Sparta's martial society. These allotments, typically ranging from 1 to 4 hectares, were distributed equally among Spartan male citizens, the Spartiates, to provide the agricultural income necessary for their full-time military service. In the hills around the village of Calivia, satellite surveys revealed irregular clusters of boundary stones, some consistent with classical-era measurements, others haphazardly placed. These ghost walls, buried beneath centuries of olive cultivation, speak to repeated redivisions of land. Each realignment stripped away a fraction of territory from smaller holders and siphoned it to the powerful, a silent transfer enacted without any public decree. Excavations uncovered fragments of stamped pottery bearing ownership marks. A stylized helmet or spear etched into clay signified the original allotment, yet in later layers, these marks vanished altogether, replaced by generic symbols or, in some cases, graffiti scrawled in black slip, proclaiming new, unofficial proprietors. Some young men arrived at their agoge training already anxious, having heard rumors that their inheritance had somehow shrunk in their absence. Grain yields once generous were now meager. Boundary stones marking their fields appeared to have been moved, just enough to shave off a few furrows. In theory, every Spartan boy born into a recognized family would inherit his father's plot, ensuring that at least on paper wealth and privilege circulated evenly through generations. Imagine a young Spartan man standing at the boundary stones of his Kleros. Whispered anxieties, the first signs of disquiet, yet by the early 5th century BCE, murmurs began to spread through Spartan agoras. Officially, the Druzhia, the Council of Elders, denied any tampering. They insisted that underpopulation and administrative errors accounted for discrepancies. But behind closed doors, influential families leveraged their connections to consolidate land, quietly annexing adjacent plots when heirs died childless or were exiled for failing to uphold Spartan discipline. Without a robust mechanism for recording transfers or verifying boundaries, Sparta prized oral law over written records. Wealth began to concentrate in fewer hands. For the average Spartiate, the loss was ruinous. No longer could he afford the mess contribution fiducia required for full citizenship. Without that, he slipped from homoios peer to hypomiones inferior, barred from the assembly and from holding military command. The very fabric of Spartan equality. One plot, one warrior began to fray. Archaeological clues beneath olive groves. Modern archaeology offers tantalizing glimpses of this quiet dispossession. Geophysical mapping has exposed subterranean wall stone foundations that once demarcated field, houses or storehouses which no longer align with surviving Kleros lines. The laws of Lycurgus and silent revisions. Sparta's legendary lawgiver Lycurgus is said to have codified the Kleros system in the 9th century BCE, enshrining land equality as sacrosanct. But historians note a curious paradox. No original text of Lycurgus's laws survives, and later accounts written by outsiders such as Plutarch centuries after the fact often conflict on details. Some describe rigid inheritance rules, others hint at exceptions for war widows or state reclamations for military coffers. This legal ambiguity provided fertile ground for opportunists. If the precise wording of the law remained unpinned to a scroll, those markers sit squarely within the bounds of a landowner whose family only acquired the plot in The 2nd century CE, the vanished line of demarcation, now buried beneath generations of plowing, testifies to an original allotment erased by the slow accretion of new boundaries, a Claros lost in plain sight. How could a dispossessed Spartiate argue that his grandfather's plot had vanished into thin air? A 4th century BCE account recorded by a visiting Athenian magistrate tells of a man named Demonids, told by Helot laborers round the hearth, or by disenfranchised Spartans at wine-soaked symposiums in Messenia. They formed a counter-narrative to the official anthem of equality, revealing a society where the very essence of Spartiate privilege could be revoked in the silent redrafting of earth and stone, who, upon returning from the front lines, discovered only half his ancestral fields remained. Denied recourse at the Ephors court, he led a small band of Hypomeons to reclaim his land by force. They were swiftly suppressed, and Demonids was exiled, his name struck from citizen rolls. The elders, guardians of tradition and secrets, could claim divine endorsement for any adjustments made for the good of the state. Thus, over generations, the unwritten law yielded to necessity or expediency, allowing Sparta's ruling class to redraw boundaries in whispers rather than proclamations. Oral histories and the scandal of land theft. Remarkably, fragments of oral history preserve the outrage of those wronged. Such stories circulated quietly. The archaeological hunt for ghost boundaries. Today, scholars armed with ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR surveys continue to search for vestiges of original Kleroi. In 2018, a team led by Dr. Eleni Papadopoulos discovered a series of subterranean marker posts, narrow stone shafts set into bedrock beneath a modern olive grove near Tegadis's foothills. These markers matched against ancient measuring rods discovered in the region. Each carved notch, each worn face of a marker, speaks to the silent conflicts over land that helped reshape an empire of warriors into a relic of its former glory. With each lost acre, fewer could afford the mess contributions. With each lost mess, fewer could claim full citizenship. This collapse was both economic and existential. Sparta's power relied on an army sustained by Helot labor. As you walk among the ancient boundary stones still visible near the ruins of ancient Sparta, in the hush of olive groves, archaeologists continue to piece together this forgotten chapter, mapping ghost boundaries, decoding fragments of law, and giving voice to those whose fields were stolen in the shadows. Their work reminds us that history is not only written in battles and decrees, but in the quiet redrawing of lines across the earth, where power often claims territory without ever lifting a sword. In this segment, you have traced the journey of the Claros, from promise to paradox, from equal allotment to whispered dispossession, and witnessed how the fate of Spartan identity hinged on the silent shifts of earth and stone. As you close your eyes tonight, let the knowledge of those vanished boundaries linger, a testament to the power of land, law, and the secrets buried just beneath the surface of history. Spartan religion, rites, rituals, and blood oaths long before the chill of winter or the heat of battle claimed their thrones. The gods of Greece held sway over every Spartan heartbeat. In this segment, we leave behind the clatter of spears and the hush of cloaked killers to step into the flickering torchlight of temple courts, where the sacred and the profane entwined in ceremonies of blood and devotion. His altar ringed with freshwater springs. Fishermen and helots alike left barley cakes in shallow bowls, honoring Apollo's fleeting visit in the guise of the sheep herder Carneus. Processions wound through cobbled streets as choruses of men and boys sang hymns to Apollo's protective watch. Underscored a paradox, Sparta's greatest strength in war sprang from its periods of peace and devotion. Each Carnea reaffirmed the bond between citizen and god, reminding warriors that even the sharpest spear must bow to sacred law. A single victory, awarded in obscure footraces, a race of 3 jumps known as the Delichos, carried more weight than laurels won on distant battlefields. All military activity ceased, no weapons were drawn nor battles waged. Families brought flocks of sheep to the central altar, where priests sacrificed animals in ritual drippings of wine and cast neglectful individuals into communal shame, praying for gentle floods that would nourish the rich alluvial fields. Even Apollo Amyclios, venerated at a monumental cult complex just outside Sparta, held sway over purification rites and oracles, his wooden image carried in solemn procession during spring festivals. Here, amidst chants and crackling fires, we glimpse how Sparta's warriors, hardened by drill and discipline, paid tribute to divine forces, whose favor they believed essential for survival. The Pantheon in Laconia, beyond Artemis Orthia, though Artemis Orthia's sanctuary drew our deepest exploration, Sparta's religious landscape was far richer. Zeus Hyrios presided over the muster and release of armies, his cult shrine atop Mount Taygetus, a wind-whipped outpost where commanders offered first fruits of grain and the earliest sacrifices of oxen before any campaign. Athena Chalkioikos guarded bronzeworks and shields. Her temple in the city's heart served as both armory, chapel, and council meeting place. Poseidon, Limnios, too, claimed a marshland sanctuary near the Eurotas River. The Carnea, Spartan summer's sacred pause. Each year in late summer, Sparta ground to a halt for the Carnea festival. For 10 days, the city became a consecrated zone of music, dance, and athletic contests, echoing earlier pastoral times. Before iron ever kissed shield, this enforced pause in martial duties, the unathematic oaths, binding blood and state at the culmination of ceremonial rites. Whether in Carnea, Orthian flogging ceremonies, or pre-battle offerings, Spartiates swore oaths that transcended simple promises, known as anathemata. These vows bound the swearer's blood to the polis itself. Under moonlit canopies or within temple shadows, a young man would drape his hand in sacrificial blood, often from a freshly cut piglet, ear, and press his palm against a stone stele inscribed with Sparta's unwritten covenant. By my blood, he would intone, I pledge to live and die as one with Sparta. The echo of that vow lingered long after the blood was washed away. Here, we expand upon their sacred dimensions. The lashes were not mere brutality, but a ritual cleansing. As each strike fell, it was believed to peel away spiritual impurities, unveiling the true, unblemished core of the initiate. Sipping sparse wine, as performers traced geometric patterns in the snow and dust, the festival's origin myth speaks of Apollo challenging mortals to match divine grace, a reminder that bodily perfection, like martial prowess, was a gift honed through ritual. For a brief dawn chorus, Spartan discipline found poetic expression in the human form, amplifying communal bonds through shared vulnerability. A divine contract sealing his loyalty in ways mortal words alone could not. Breaking such an oath was more than treason. It was a sacrilege against Zeus Hyrios himself, punishable by exile or, in extreme cases, ritual execution carried out by priestly caste. Artemis Orthia's whip rites revisited our previous dive into the subterranean chambers of Orthia, hinted at the whipping ceremonies performed on young men, a transformative ordeal cloaked in sacred paradox. The whip used a plated thong dipped in red ochre or animal blood served as both instrument of pain and conduit for divine energy. After the ceremony, pilgrims immersed themselves in cold spring water at the river Limnios. Against the backdrop of snow-capped Taygetus slopes, boys and young men performed synchronized leaps and turns to the beat of drums and lyres. Their bare bodies, painted with white clay and black ochre patterns, embodied the balance of strength and vulnerability, symbolically washing away all remnants of mortal frailty. Old hymn fragments discovered on pottery shards show participants singing, Orthia, whose arrows pierce the soul, whose whip reveals what stirs below. We walk reborn beneath your gaze. In scarlet truth our valor grows. Thus, the ceremony was as much an inward journey as it was a public spectacle. The Gymnopedia, naked dances of renewal. Winter's End brought the Gymnopedia, a 3-day festival of nude dancing by dancing youths. Gymnasts, spectators gathered on hillside terraces. Animal sacrifice. From bull slaughter to guinea fowl draw, no Spartan festival was complete without animal sacrifice, though the scale and symbolism varied widely. Bulls were reserved for state occasions, mass slaughters at the Hyrios altar preceding major campaigns. Their thighs burned as an offering, and the remaining meat distributed to citizens in a rare feast. Mystery cults of Demeter and Corey found adherents among Spartan women, who conducted secret nocturnal rites in underground grottos, seeking blessings for fertility and safe childbirth. The cult of Asclepius brought healing priests from Epidaurus to tend the wounded, blending Spartan stoicism with gentle therapies of sleep and dream incubation. And priests once exalted became destitute. Yet even as walls crumbled, The memory of those rituals endured in local folklore. You might almost hear the distant cadence of drums, or feel the echo of sandals on stone. The air itself seems to carry faint revenants of hymn and oath, reminders that religion and ritual were not addenda to Spartan life, but its very heartbeat binding citizen to city, mortal to divine, blade to belief. Farmers still cast barley cakes into spring pools at Limnios. Hermit priests whispered fragments of anthem in moonlit caves. We have felt the paradox of pain as purification and vulnerability as strength. As you drift toward sleep, let the toll of distant drums and the whisper of flame-licked ivy guide you gently through the temples of Laconia, where every prayer was a step toward forging not only warriors, but a people bound by sacred covenant. Smaller ceremonies, like the monthly festival to Dionysus, used goats or guinea fowl, like Cybele and Attis deities, whose ecstatic rites contrasted sharply with Spartan restraint. While public worship remained firmly rooted in ancestral tradition, private devotion embraced these new mysteries, offering individuals a more personal connection to the divine. Their throats pinched swiftly to honor the god of wine and revelry. Bones and entrails were inspected by haruspices diviners for omens. Cracked shoulder blades signaled impending strife, while clear innards portended victory. Such rituals interwove faith and fate, infusing every decision whether to march, to hold council, or to raise fields with divine counsel. Even the helots, tasked with cleaning altars and carting carcasses, played a sacred role, their labor sanctified by participation in the bloodiest rites. Mystery cults and foreign influences. Despite its reputation for isolationism, Sparta was not immune to wider Hellenic religious currents. Trade routes carried back trinkets and small statuettes of gods, the fall of sanctuaries, and the enduring echo. With Sparta's decline in the Hellenistic period, many shrines fell into disrepair. Temples to Athena and Poseidon collapsed under neglect. Statues were looted. Today, as you stand among vine-clad ruins where torches once blazed, in this segment, we have witnessed the rhythms of Spartan worship, from grand state festivals to blood-tipped oaths, from naked dances to secret grottos. You rise, slip into a homespun tunic coarse as burlap, and step outside. Smoke curls from a clay hearth, and a pot of thin porridge simmers slowly, millet boiled in goat's milk, sweetened only by a drizzle of wildflower honey if you're lucky. The taste is bland, but warming. In spring, you till and sow. In summer, you harvest and thresh. In autumn, you press olives and crush grapes. In winter, you split wood and mend fences. There is no feast day for you, no festivals to break the rhythm of labor. State-sanctioned slaughters during the Cryptia ensured that any vigorous young helot might be killed without trial. Secret societies formed in grottos near riverbanks, where clandestine meetings planned uprisings by the light of oil lamps. Warily, you and a handful of others approach the altar of Apollo Amyclios. Serves as a stark reminder that your labor underwrites Spartan greatness. Yet paradoxically, the humiliation also forges bonds among helots, shared suffering as a quiet promise of solidarity. After the ceremony, you return to the field stained with ash and torch soot, carrying secret hope that you will live to taste revolution. Stripped of your homespun tunics and clad only in goat skins, you dance in circles before the temple priests, weaving under swinging torches, your bare feet bleeding from coarse stones. The dance ends with each helot prostrating before a statue of Zeus. Hyriosa forced submission to divine and civic masters alike. Spears were fashioned from olive wood, short swords from melted tools. Coins were sewn into tunics to bribe sympathetic guards. The memory of a great revolt after the earthquake of 464 BCE, in which thousands of helots rose and seized nearby towns, lived on in whispered legend, a proof that Sparta was not invincible. Declared an enemy of Sparta, fathers hid their promising sons on moonless nights. Mothers sobbed as they bound blood-stained bandages around their children's limbs, trophies of survival. Instead, your only rest comes under the full moon, when you and fellow helots gather to trade news or pray to earth deities in hushed tones, careful that no Spartan scout overhears, delivering the bare sustenance needed for a day of unrelenting labor. You awaken to pale light filtering through woven rush mats. In the evenings, you return to your hut where a husband mends a torn cloak by firelight, or a mother teaches her children scraps of ancestral song. The most prized possession is a tattered hymn book carved on thin wooden slats, fragments of folk tales and seasonal prayers, preserved by memory. the elderly weathered by decades of toil. Small children clutching goatskin sacks exchange quiet greetings. The crackle of straw as children chase one another until they collapse in giggles. These moments are fleeting, precious breaths against an existence defined by obligation, and yet even in joy. The shadow of oversight looms. The slightest noise late at night can bring a patrol riding through fields, torches ablaze, to confiscate grain or punish imagined collusion. There is solidarity here born of shared hardship. Yet under every polite nod lies unspoken fear. At any moment, an overseer in bronze greaves may appear, demanding extra hours or imposing fines of grain for minor infractions. The air carries the damp chill of night and the distant bleat of sheep. Your body is already sore from yesterday's labor harvesting flax stalks bent to knee-height, gathering olives atop rickety ladders, turning the heavy millstone for barley grain. Born as conquered peoples and consigned by law to serve Spartan citizens. In this segment, we step away from polished shields and crimson cloaks to walk the furrows of barley fields, toiling under overseer's lash, whispering in the dark, and nurturing fragile hopes of freedom. Dawn in the fields before the first trumpet summons the Spartiates to breakfast. There is no reed mat here, only packed earth strewn with straw, your neighbor's women bent with pregnancy, the overseer's whip by sunrise. You are marching across fertile fields in single file, baskets slung over your back. The overseer walks ahead, staff in hand, a blunt instrument more feared than any Spartan cane. His voice is low and cold. Faster. Don't let your master's land lie fallow. If you slow, even by a breath, the staff cracks across your shoulders. Helot's skin, unprotected by bronze, reddens at once. The sting a reminder of your place in the hierarchy. Work is seasonal but relentless. Domestic lives in servitude despite the weight of servitude. Helots carve out families and communities within stone walls. Laughter sometimes flares, a small dance around a makeshift fire after a bountiful olive harvest. Fear and rebellion. Fear is the helot's constant companion. Yet beneath fear flickered resistance. The ritual of submission each year. During the Carnia festival, select helots were required to perform humiliating rituals. This ritual, brutal and public. Helot cultural practices despite legal erasure. Helots preserved cultural identity in domestic arts. In the dim light of family kitchens, elderly women pressed linseed oil into cloth for communal clothing, their hands remembering generations of textile patterns. Field songs call and response, chants guided rhythmic labor, each beat synchronized so that the sickle as flash and the basket as tilt became one dance of survival. During winter solstice, you kindle small bonfires at hilltops, past and hopeful whispers at clandestine gatherings. For most helots, freedom remains a distant dream, contingent on capricious favor or the good fortune of unexpected crisis. You watch Athenians and Corinthians marvel at these humble goods, ignorant of the hands that made them under duress. Helot revolts and pressure hastened its decline. In the aftermath of defeat, surviving helots seized lands, established autonomous communities, and even allied with Thebes. You witnessed the ruins of a settlement. At Messin, a free helot city, its fortified walls and public agora a testament to what oppressed hands can build when shackles break. Profits are scant and heavily taxed. Each cracked pillar, each fragment of public assembly hall, speaks of a people who endured centuries of bondage before carving out their own destiny, and whispered secret prayers alongside the helot community. You have tasted the thin porridge of servitude and glimpsed the sparks of rebellion, lying just beneath Sparta's polished surface. As you close your eyes tonight, let the soft rustle of barley stalks and the muffled chant of clandestine hymns carry you toward sleep, reminders that the true pulse of a state often lies not in its highest towers, but in the rough earth swept by those whose voices history almost silenced. But the chance to clutch a few silver obols gives you taste of autonomy, offering scraps of corn and barley to Demeter's spirit, pleading for fertile seasons ahead. You carve symbols of wheat sheaves into soft clay, then bury them at crossroads, unofficial altars that Spartans never clean up but tacitly ignore, granting a sliver of sanctity to your quiet observances. Pathways to Manamission. The granting of freedom was rare, but not impossible. Helots who showed extraordinary loyalty or provided critical service in war sometimes received dicaria, certificates that set them free and bestowed a small plot of land. You have heard stories of a man, Marcellos of Amyclae, who guided Spartan scouts through Messenian hills, onions and beans tending themselves under a distracted overseer's gaze. You trade garlic for a fragment of cheese, barter eggs for a pinch of salt, These microeconomies sustain you through lean months and bind your kin together, saving a patrol from ambush. In gratitude, the Ephors declared him Dikaros, and his descendants eventually integrated into minor Spartan ranks. But such stories are exceptions. The Helot household economy. In rare moments of leniency, Helots managed small kitchen gardens behind masters' homes, patches of herbs. During religious festivals, Spartans sometimes allow Helots to sell handcrafted ware, simple clay cups or woven baskets in market stalls under strict supervision. The legacy of Helot resistance. Though Sparta's military power waned after Leuctra in 371 BCE, today, as you walk among those ancient stone blocks, you sense a quiet triumph beneath weathered marble. Reflection. Voices from the rough earth. In this segment, you have tilled the fields, felt the lash.
Segment 9. The Spartan Symposium. Wine, wit, and political discourse as the last embers of daylight fade beyond the Tagatas Ridge. You are led to a more intimate gathering, far removed from the roar of battle drills and the hush of clandestine rites. Here, in a private and elegantly appointed tract, their flame flickering against whitewashed walls adorned with simple yet evocative frescoes. A reclining figure drinking from a kylix, its aroma earthy and faintly resonant. The taste is surprisingly gentle, an easy invitation into the evening's ritual. You recline on your left elbow's shoulder, aligned with elbow. Each guest, finger tipped with wine, flicks a drop of liquid at a small disc floating atop the saucers, aiming to sink it. Tonight it falls to a seasoned E4, renowned for his diplomatic skill with Athens. He raises cup in hand and speaks of the recent delegation to Delphi, how the Pythia-S cryptic pronouncement may shape Sparta-S foreign policy, and what omens the small cracks in her tripod bowl might foretell. Laughter murmurs through the hall as discs bob anecdotes from Persian campaigns mingled with quotations from Homer and Lycurgus's edicts. A general recounts the strategic value of supply line sabotage. A philosopher compares human nature to the seasons, whether yield graciously like spring or harden under pressure like winter-esque frost. In this environment, ideas are tested as rigorously as bodies have been tested on training ground. And swirl this lighthearted contest, a rare release of tension for men, trained always to steady their aim in war. Legs trailing out to the rattan allow the drink to percolate. They still do not recline beside men at peaceable symposia. Tonight, she sings a mournful refrain about the fragility of life, her voice trailing off into silence so profound that no clinking of cups dares disturb it. In those moments, you feel the symposium's true power. The ability to suspend time, to connect mortal concerns with enduring truths, and to temper the warrior's soul with measured empathy. Instead, skilled, Hitiri-educated companions versed in music, rhetoric, and etiquette to perform or to guide conversation. Their role is both muse and moderator. They recite elegiac couplets, play the aulos, and subtly steer debates toward philosophical depth or gentle humor. A young Hetira, skilled musician and conversationalist, appears with a small lyre and begins a soft ode to Spartan virtues. Conversation deepens arguments over the merits of communal mess halls versus private banquets. Debates on whether Helot rebellions could be quelled through reform or only through stricter control, and ruminations on the role of courage in an age of shifting alliances, austerity, loyalty, and honor. Her voice, clear and unhurried, drapes over the assembled like a gentle breeze. Each verse an invitation to reflection rather than a claim. Its warmth loosening the tension in your shoulders that the agoge left behind. A laurel-crowned poet reciting verse and a pair of lyre players lost in melody. Cups are lifted to the silence that follows peace, the bond between Claros and Polis, and our shared destiny beneath the same sun. There are no drunken brawls, no excessive revelry, only a disciplined interplay of words and wit. Guests speak with deliberate pauses, choosing each phrase as carefully as they choose every thrust of the spear. Interruptions are rare. When one speaker yields the floor, a brief silence of respect falls before the next raises his goblet. With measured grace, Each guest drains his cup stand and exchanges the ritual cheek kiss or shoulder clasp before departing in pairs under torchlit arches. The corridor widens into a rectangular hall with polished stone floors warmed by rush pit mats. Along three sides stand low wooden couches, stock clients covered in rich woolen blankets dyed in muted indigo and ochre. Sparta-esque social elite convene, not to sharpen spears, but to sharpen minds over flowing cups of wine. Welcome to the Spartan Symposium, a ritual of restrained conviviality, where measured indulgence meets the austere decorum of a warrior society. Entering the Klein Court one by one, participants lift their goblets and make brief, pointed toasts to valor, to our ancestors, to the embers of Carnea, before draining the vessel in a single breath. The sound of cups being set down echoes softly, as if affirming collective purpose. You step through a narrow corridor lit by bronze oil lamps. A single attendant in linen and crimson sash offers you a shallow goblet of diluted wine flavored with pine resin. The order of service. From chiasma to final toast, the symposium follows a precise order. Each stage marked by exchanged questions, toasts, and performances. Chiasma, the host, pours wine to the brim of each cup. Kotabo shallow saucers float on a broad, shallow basin of water at the room center. Recitals and readings. A herald announces the first performer. Symposiarch's discourse. The office of symposiarch rotates among the guests. Second pour and philosophical exchange. Wine is replenished, this time a heartier blend laced with honey and desert figs. Concluding toasts and departure. As the hour grows late, the symposiarch calls for final toasts. The art of Spartan conversation. What sets the Spartan Symposium apart is its rigorous decorum. Yet beneath this restraint lies a sharpening of intellect, the role of women in it. Though Spartan women enjoy more freedoms than those in most Greek city-states, one such Atira, Charis of Mantinia, is celebrated for her haunting interpretation of Sapphic fragment.
Food, fellowship, and political networking, while banquets of lavish fare are rare in Sparta. Symposium tables still offer modest delicacies, olive oil flatbreads topped with crushed carobs, and soft cheese smoked fish preserved in sea salt from Laconia's southern shores, roasted chestnuts, glazed in honey and lightly dusted with sesame, seasonal fruits, figs, pomegranates, and pears served alongside finely chopped nuts. These simple dishes encourage conversation, rather than gluttony, as you nibble a slice of pear. The laws of Lycurgus mandated that every Spartiate spend some evenings in the mess session. Strategy and policy were debated not only in council chambers, but around cushioned clines. Personal loyalties were strengthened by shared confidences. You carry with you more than the memory of honeyed wine and soft music. The night air is cool, scented with wild thyme, tasted restrained luxuries, and witnessed the artful interplay of wine, music, and debate as you drift toward sleep. Let the measured cadence of conversation and the soft glow of lamplight guide you into dreams, where words form bridges as enduring as the stone walls of Sparta itself, and the distant call of an owl drifts over silent rooftops. In these hushed moments, you understand that the symposium was more than a social diversion. It was the meeting ground of Spartan ideals, where discipline met dialogue, and where the same rigor that forged hoplites was applied to the shaping of policies, the settling of disputes, and the nurturing of intellect. You bear the echo of voices raised in thoughtful discourse, the resonance of laughter carefully contained, and the reminder that in any civilization, no matter how martial, words can be as potent as spears. Rivalries were tempered by mutual respect, and in this crucible of civility, the Spartan elite ensured that the martial spirit was always guided by measured counsel. Yet these private symposia allowed leading citizens to convene beyond the constraints of communal dining halls. You overhear an ambassador negotiating a grain shipment with a Thessalian envoy. Across the Klein, two young ephors compare notes on tax revenues from distant allies. Friendships and alliances are formed here as surely as they are forged in war quietly. With shared cups and confidential glances, the symposium's place in Spartan society in a state defined by unrelenting rigor. The symposium offers a necessary counterbalance, a space where the mind, not the body, is honed. Through these gatherings, Sparta maintained cohesion among its ruling class. The quiet legacy of Spartan conversation as you rise from your Klein. Under the gentle glow of the last lamp, outside, torches line the corridor leading back to the barracks. In this segment, you have reclined among Sparta's elite. Segment 10, Legacy and Decline, from invincibility to obscurity as the centuries turned, and Sparta's fame shone across the Greek world. Subtle cracks began to form beneath its polished shields, an austere discipline. In this final chapter, we trace how a society forged in iron gradually unraveled, how social upheaval, shifting warfare, and internal decay transformed the once invincible polis into a memory whispered among ruins. Through these echoes of decline, Plutarch records that by the time of Lycurgus's supposed reforms, some 8,000 citizens existed. By the Roman period, only a few hundred remained. Yet as lighter, more mobile forces exploited terrain and outflanked rigid squares, Sparta's battlefield doctrine grew increasingly obsolete. Rivalries between royal houses, disputes among the five ephors, and conflicts between council and assembly hindered coherent foreign policy. When Philip II of Macedon rose in the north, the communal mess halls Caesacia, once the crucibles of equality and camaraderie, suffered as fewer men could afford membership. Without the everyday ritual of shared meals and drills, young Spartans lost the social bonds that sustained discipline. The gap between rich and poor Spartiates widened, undermining the myth of equal citizenship. Macedon's combined arms crushed the remains of Greek resistance, introducing ideas that clashed with Spartan austerity. As wealth consolidated, the harsh training of the agoge loosened, and the once rigid schedule of exercise, study, and meals yielded to leisurely pursuits. The stoic bearing prized by Lycurgus gave way to indulgence in fashion and leisure, a stark betrayal of ancestral virtue. Leaving Sparta isolated, each defeat eroded the legend of invincibility, weakening Sparta's alliances and emboldening former subjects Arcadians, Messenians, and elsewhere to assert independence. In the battles of Mantinea for 18 BCE and Leuctra 371 BCE, innovative Theban tactics under Epaminondas shattered the Spartan line. Subsumed by helot-run farms or quietly annexed by wealthier households, we see both the endurance of Spartan ideals and the human fragility that lies at the heart of every empire. The seeds of decline, demographic and economic strains in the aftermath of Thermopylae and Plataea. Sparta's power peaked. Its hoplites were feared from Ionia to Sicily, and its allies paid tribute in grain and coin. Yet even then, hidden burdens darkened the polis. They outnumbered citizens by as much as 10 to 1. Each helot revolt, like the Great Uprising after the 464 BCE earthquake, forced the state to divert forces from campaigns to internal security, further straining manpower and morale. As helot rebellions flickered through the countryside, Spartan resources were bled in constant vigilance, sapping the youthful vigor that once fueled her martial supremacy. The constant demands of full-time military service meant that Spartiate numbers began to dwindle. Each adult male required a kleros to sustain his mess contributions, yet kleroi remained fixed while the population grew. Military innovations and Spartan stagnation. Meanwhile, the art of warfare evolved across Greece and beyond. The rise of combined arms tactics, lighter infantry, cavalry, Spartan commanders, steeped in tradition, were slow to adapt. Political fragmentation and external pressures politically. The dual kingship and ephorate that once balanced Spartan power became sources of paralysis. Although Sparta briefly regained autonomy after Alexander's death, the shock of Macedonian rule further exposed her weaknesses. Social decay and the loss of Lycurgan virtue at home. Erosion of Lycurgan ideals accelerated the polis's disintegration. Luxury crept into Spartan habitations. Some families adorned private homes with imported Italic pottery and frescoed walls, luxuries once scorned. Foreign courtesans and cultivated philosophers visited.
Archaeology of the fallen polis today. Wandering through Sparta's archaeological park, you encounter silent witnesses of decline. A Roman bathhouse overlays the Thessalian training ground. Byzantine chapels nest within the crumbled walls of earlier shrines. Each successive layer of construction is an act of erasure. Sacred precincts buried by new faiths. A Spartan regimen enforces strict discipline, yet the deeper lessons how societies must renew their institutions to survive. Stranger passing by, that here obedient to their laws, that communal bonds require constant renewal to survive demographic and economic pressures, felt the tension between enduring ideals and the necessity of change. As you drift into sleep, let the silent columns and shattered altars guide your thoughts to the impermanence of power and the lasting resonance of ideas, soft reminders that, like Sparta itself, every life is a fleeting blend of strength, struggle, and transformation. In the end, the greatest legacy of Sparta may not be her fields of conquest, but the question she poses to every generation: what must we preserve? And what must we reform? How do we balance tradition and innovation? And above all, how do we shape communities that both endure and uplift their members? We lie, you feel the weight of human aspiration and the fragility of all endeavor. That small monument on the hot ridge has endured far longer than Spartiate citizenship itself. A testament to ideals that outlast institutions. How privilege can corrode virtue, and how myth and history intertwine our best gleaned from Sparta's own rise and fall. The ruins whisper that no greatness is everlasting. Every empire, like every person, must confront change or be consumed by it. Barracks replaced by workshops, altars crushed to build fortifications. In this palimpsest of stone, Sparta's silent transformation from undefeated warrior state to provincial backwater is writ large. Half-collapsed temples to Athena and Poseidon stand choked by shrubs. The Grand Agora, once the bustling marketplace of a mighty city, lies strewn with column fragments and shattered dedication steely, remnants of communal dining halls, long benches, and hearthsire, half buried under centuries of silt. Excavations revealed that many public buildings were repurposed in later century. Cultural legacy and modern remembrance, yet out of ruin grows remembrance. In the 18th and 19th centuries, European military theorists returned to Spartan Manuel's Plutarch's Lives, Xenophon's Constitution of the Lacedaemonian Psyche models of discipline and civic duty. From Frederick the Great's drills to the Prussian officer corps, echoes of Sparta shaped modern armies. Educators praised Spartan equality. Philosophers admired the focus on communal welfare over individual gain. Today, Spartan stands as shorthand for minimalism and toughness. A Spartan room has bare essentials, reflections on mortality and memory. As you stand at Leonidas' memorial stones inscribed with the epitaph, "Go tell the Spartans." Sparta's story reminds us that discipline without adaptation can lead to rigidity. That courage divorced from justice can become tyranny. In this segment, you have traced Sparta's journey from unchallenged supremacy to quiet obscurity.
The unwritten future, echoes and possibilities, as we emerge from the shadows of Sparta's past, its trials and triumphs, its ceremonies of pain, and its moments of excess, we arrive at a moment, both rare and profound, the point at which history ends and imagination begins. The vine tendrils cling to fallen columns as if reluctant to let go of structures time has swallowed. There is no guide. Voice hear only the soft sigh of breeze through olive branches and the distant murmur of cicadas on sun-warmed rock. In this silence, the questions echo loudest. Here, in the hush between what was and what might have been, we stand poised before the unwritten future of this extraordinary polis. In this final, open-ended chapter, we will listen for the faintest echoes in the stone, and what new society sprouted from their hard-won autonomy. Archaeology may unearth a pottery shard, inscribed with a name, or a boundary stone defying modern maps. Oral traditions may preserve a fragment of a Helid hymn, equality while often overlooking the darker currents of repression and inequality. And so, the question remains, how will future generations reinterpret Spartan ideals? Which echoes will they preserve? Yet he also entrusted Sparta to adapt, to maintain balance between law and the ever-shifting needs of the polis. In our present moment, the principle he might urge us to consider is this: no law, no matter how sacred, ever fully anticipates the transformations of time. And which will they silence? but the fullness of lived experience, dreams, fears, regrets remains buried beneath layers of earth and centuries of silence. Consider the whispers of what if, and invite you to ponder how Sparta's legacy continues to unfold within our own unfolding stories. The silence beyond the ruins. Walk with me now along a rough footpath that threads through crumbled walls and overgrown temples. What became of the last full-blooded Spartiate, last to wear the crimson cloak and bear the shield? They prompt us to reflect on our own institutions. Where are we rigidly clinging to outdated norms? Which voices remain unheard in our assemblies? And how might small shifts today shape the legacies we leave for tomorrow? Where did their descendants scatter, and what memories did they carry into foreign lands? How did Helot communities evolve after their revolts? These inquiries have no definitive answers. Ghosts of Sparta in the modern imagination. Consider how Sparta has lived on in art and literature far beyond its Mediterranean cradle. From Renaissance painters who immortalized Leonidas's stand at Thermopylae, to Enlightenment philosophers who lauded Lycurgus's laws as precursors to modern democracy, to contemporary films that recast the 300 as icons of individual heroism, Sparta's image has been reshaped with each era's hopes and anxieties. In Victorian salons, Spartan austerity was extolled as the antidote to industrial excess. During early 20th century military reforms, officers studied Xenophon to instill discipline and morale. Today, fitness movements named Spartan Race challenge participants to endure mud and obstacle courses as modern rites of passage. What these reinventions share is selective memory. We amplify the aspects that suit our values: valor, discipline, the unwritten laws. Beyond Lycurgus's vision, Lycurgus's legendary constitution laid the foundation for communal eating, equal allotments, and lifelong warrior service. If Sparta had developed mechanisms for transparent land records instead of relying solely on oral tradition, might the Claros crisis have been averted? Had Spartan commanders embraced tactical innovations alongside the hoplite phalanx, could they have sustained their military edge? If social bonds beyond the symposium had been fostered to include women, helots, and foreigners more equitably, might a more resilient society have emerged? These what-ifs are not idle fantasies. Echoes in everyday life. Pause for a moment and listen to the rhythms of your own day. The steady click of a pen, the hush of evening rituals, the gentle click of tile on a kitchen floor. These ordinary patterns mirror the daily drills of Spartan youths, the whispered prayers of helots by moonlight, the measured toasts of a symposium. In every household, there are ceremonies, family meals, birthday rites, the turning of seasons that carry meaning far beyond themselves. What modern agoge shapes our children? Is it school, social media, or the drills of competitive sport, underpaid, taken for granted? What contemporary helot fields yield the labor that underpins our comfort, often unseen? Where do we enact our own carnea pauses, moments when work halts and collective reflection takes priority? In the structures we build, the rituals we honor, and the silences we sustain. Let the images of stone altars and olive groves, of red-cloaked youth and tattered helot tunics. And so it must be with our own understanding. Each generation turns the lamp of inquiry toward the past, revealing fresh insights, reshaping the contours of what we thought we knew. Drift like morning mist across your mind's eye. Leave you at this threshold, the boundary between Sparta's bygone world and the landscapes of your own imagination. May your dreams carry you through olive groves and marble halls, through fields of barley and clandestine grottos, until morning finds you rested, your mind alight with questions and wonder. The story of Sparta remains unfinished, not because its end was abrupt, but because its true legacy lives on in every soul that dares to learn, reflect, and imagine what comes next. And in that space, pose your own questions. By contemplating these parallels, we find that Sparta's story is not locked in the Mediterranean, it lives in us. An open invitation, its flame trembles in the hush, casting slender shadows that dance on cracked marble. Those centuries have passed since priests kindled fires for Artemis and Apollo. That lamp remains alive, an ember of memory, a spark of possibility. Now, as this to our odyssey approaches its close, I invite you to linger in that silent expanse between past and future. Which aspects of the Spartan experiment would you preserve, and which would you transform? How does the tension between communal strength and individual freedom play out in your life and in the societies you inhabit? What hidden chambers in your memory, in your communities, in your world await rediscovery and reinterpretation? Instead, this open ending is an invitation to become co-authors of Sparta, as ongoing narrative interpreters who do not merely consume history, but who listen to its echoes to guide our present choices. There are no prescribed answers here. The lasting flame. As you prepare to drift into sleep, imagine lighting a solitary lamp within the ruins of a Spartan temple. In the east, dawn approaches. Soon, golden light will spill across those ancient stones, illuminating new facets of ground long trodden. And now, dear listener, good night, and may your sleep be guided by the softest echoes of history's enduring flame. Spartan women, silent pillars of the polis beyond bronze shields and cloaked warriors. Spartan women wielded influence unlike anywhere else in classical Greece. This 2-hour journey will trace their lives from childhood in the agoge's shadow to marriage rites, from property rights that stunned Athenians to the whispered counsels given before battle, racing. Along the Eurotas's banks, young Spartiate girls learn poetry recitals, judged by female elders in flowing peplos, fostering camaraderie and prestige. Domestic strategy for managing estates, and readings of Homer's warrior women, Atalanta, Penthesilea, and mastering the javelin's light spear. We'll feel their lullabies, witness their hidden networks. At Olympia, first woman to win, and her victory inscription demands equal prestige for Spartan women. A bride is stolen from her family's courtyard, symbolic of her transition to her husband's oikos household. The darkness, the hushed breaths, the sacred utterances of Demeter's priestess, and discover how they shape Sparta's destiny. Women ensure olive groves don't lie fallow. They negotiate with Helot overseers, and coordinate caravan shipments to supply the army. Childhood in the shadow of the agoge, she consecrates shields and helmets before campaigns, and presides over annual purification of armories. An unnamed Sibyl receives pilgrim Spartan matrons bringing charms for safe childbirth, and cereals to ensure bountiful harvest. Pregnant women and elderly lead efforts to repair walls, ration grain, and petition Athens for emergency aid. Fragments of Parthenian choruses reveal collars of ivy and pomegranate tokens exchanged as prizes. Birth and naming rituals. Midwives and priestesses gather to perform the metertechnoia, midwifery guides, and seasonal calendars that preserve agrarian wisdom. Blessing newborns with oils of rosemary and laurel, pooling small rations to buy redemption certificates for family members. Early training. Girls, unlike their Athenian counterparts, receive physical education, wrestling in soft sand. For promised manumission of their children, maritime merchants sometimes intervene, seeding small enclaves of Laconian practices centuries after Sparta's decline, reshaping Kleroi, distribution and introducing new crops, cumin, saffron, adding rituals to Demeter Amycleos's festival calendar, blending genetic and religious lines, offering sanctuary in distant ports, ensuring every household remains anchored to the polis's earth. Education in soft arts, under the tutelage of widowed matriarchs. Flipping swords over shields hint at underground workshop circles where women decorate pottery with martial motifs. Ritualized competition. Festivals like the Heraya and Gymnopedia include girls' races and dance contests. Marriage and household authority. The marriage capture in a nocturnal rite. Legal testimonies carved on stone attest to fierce property disputes adjudicated by ephors, guiding armies through prayers and whispering strategies across candlelit rooms, carrying Sparta's heart in their hands. Monogamy and property rights. Spartan women inherit land when male heirs die. Cases of epikleroi, transferring entire kleroi to sisters. Household management, a day in the life, overseeing Helot laborers. What does that tell us about how we view gender today? Supervising food stores, olive presses, wine cellars, hosting annual Spartan Sisters conferences on civic engagement, and coordinating relief efforts when the same fields that feed hoplites flood or fail. Political influence and council. Royal Women's Council. Behind throne room curtains, queens such as Gorgo, wife of Leonidas, I advise kings. Anecdotes from Herodotus. Gorgo's famous retort, because you Spartans are the only men who can rule us. Diplomatic missions. Princess Siniscove. Sparta rides triumphantly in chariot races. Networks of matrimonial alliances. Spartan royal families marry daughters to allied dynasties. Thessaly, Messenia, forging bonds that shape Peloponnesian War's strategies centuries later. War's silent front. Women on the home front, maintenance of the land, while men camp at Thermopylae or sail to Crete. Emergency measures. In the aftermath of Plataea and Mantinea. Religious consolation. Priestesses of Artemis, Orthia, and Demeter run Kitodasai grief rituals for families of the dead, singing laments that echo through candlelit chambers. Religious roles and mysteries. High priestess of Athena, Chalkioikos, a lifelong office. Mystery of the female oracle, in a cave near Eurotas. Secret women's ceremonies. Oral fragments describe nocturnal rites. to Gaia soil offerings buried under threshold stones, cultural patronage and education literary salon in the Parasma district. Wealthy women sponsor poets like Alcman, education of Helots' daughters. Some Spartan women teach literacy to Helot girls, maintaining scrolls of medical knowledge, artisan workshops, clay molds bearing images of Spartan women. The quandary of freedom. Slaves and men mission female freedmen's guilds. Freed Helot women gather in Theosoi to sew ceremonial cloaks for festivals. Legal cases in Ephor court. Texts record women suing nobles' cultural transmission. Freed women carry Spartan dialect to Achaea and Crete. Decline and adaptation. Messenian resettlement. Archaeology of forgotten lives. Grave goods and female burials. Recent digs at Amykla uncovered jewelry boxes with carved ivory combs, spindles, and perfume vials, tools of women's world, quietly powerful. Epigraphic treasures. A Stoic decree listing citizen women who financed a new fountain rare. Evidence of female civic benefaction. Digitizing women's voices. Collaboration between archaeologists and philologists to skin Ostraka with female names. Fragile ink, whispers of lives once erased by patriarchy. Reflections on gender and power. Sparta's enduring lesson. In a world where women could own land, exercise power, and shape policy. Echoes in modern movements. Feminist scholars invoke Spartan matrons as early exemplars of women's leadership. Open invitation as you drift to sleep. Imagine these women running barefoot on marble steps at dawn. Warships have been called the expression of a nation's power, but they also represent its limits. When Sparta built the largest navy in the ancient Mediterranean, the Delian League, a coalition of Greek city-states led by Athens and Sparta, has collapsed. The Corinthian allies of Sparta are busy quelling revolts across the Aegean, while Sparta herself is preparing for a long siege. Together, they formed one of the largest navies ever assembled in the Mediterranean, and it wouldn't even make it to Sparta. Athens and her allies were all but destroyed, allowing Sparta to complete control over the Aegean. Yet despite having the largest navy ever assembled, Sparta couldn't control her destiny. Institutional flexibility is the ability to take institutions that worked in the past and adapt them to work in the present and future. Just because something worked before doesn't mean it will work now, and vice versa. Being too rigid often leads to disaster. They create predictability. They allow us to function without having to renegotiate the terms of our interactions every time we meet. But the problem with institutions is that they ossify. Spartan tradition favored older designs that were smaller but easier to manage, but newer designs were larger and more capable. This isn't unique to Sparta. It's a recurring theme throughout maritime history. Consider the Spanish Armada, a once proud fleet of massive galleons that was eclipsed by smaller, more maneuverable Dutch vessels. We don't know if they would have found enough volunteers, but even if they did, they would have had to overcome deeply ingrained prejudices and traditions. Sparta's treatment of women is the stuff of legend. Female helots were considered little more than property. She had the potential to become a true Mediterranean power, but her inability to adapt her institutions to the demands of naval warfare. How does a modern navy strike the balance between aristocratic command and democratic ideals? You get that question answered in the comments below. Who do you think should lead your country's navy? The most qualified or the most deserving? And if you enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe and leave me a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. I'll be back next time with more lessons from the deep. See you then. And her unwillingness to expand her citizen base prevented her from achieving her destiny. Free women were confined to the domestic sphere and forbidden to participate in politics or the economy. Sparta's intense focus on martial culture left little room for other activities. They valued hardiness and self-discipline above all else. That meant that things like literature, art, and even music were suppressed. Aged Salas may have rejected the traditional values of Sparta. Despite being a warrior king, he was a patron of literature and poetry. He was famous for his Erastes, a male lover who he famously freed from slavery after falling in love with him. He might have pushed for a more open society, but he ruled at a time when Sparta's traditional values were under assault. Athens, Corinth, and Thebes were challenging Spartan hegemony. Times like these favor strong leaders who can rally the population around traditional values. Agesilaus wasn't that man. The solution for any navy is to strike a balance between the two. His brother had taken the throne and was busy suppressing rebellions among their non-citizen population. Unable to impose any lasting changes on Spartan society, Agesilaus turned his attention back to the east, embarking on a new campaign in Asia Minor. There he met his end, dying in 365 BC, shortly after his return from Asia Minor. Agesilaus' death marked the end of Sparta's golden age. The following century saw the rise of Thebes and the Macedonians. Sparta would never again play such a dominant role in Greek affairs. To maintain the traditions that make a sailor effective while adopting new technologies that keep them relevant, it's a tough balance to strike, especially when you're dealing with big egos and even bigger ships. That means that they stop working. Modern warships are complex machines requiring huge crews to operate. What if Sparta had adopted a more egalitarian method of recruiting her oarsmen? Would it have changed history? After all, Sparta was founded by a group of exiles from neighboring Argos, men who had nowhere else to go and who had no hope of returning home. Agesilaus himself owed his position to his family's exile. The Spartans understood the value of foreigners, but they kept foreigners out of their military service. Only Spartiates, men who had gone through the agoge and lived among the ephors, could serve in the military. Everyone else was relegated to the status of mercenary. That included non-citizens like the perioikoi and foreigners alike. This limited the Spartan pool of potential sailors. Instead, they had to scour the countryside of their allies, paying exorbitant prices for substandard ships and crews. Even the smallest frigates need dozens of sailors to function, and that's before you even get to the pilots and air crews. At the same time, individual sailors need to be experts in their field. One person isn't going to operate a modern warship, but rather a collection of specialists, each expert in a different system or procedure. How do you balance that tension? How do you train sailors to be experts while keeping your warships manned? Sparta didn't really have an answer. Her naval program grew rapidly, but she never developed the institutions necessary to support it. We see this in the quality of her ships, which were larger than traditional Spartan vessels, but far smaller than her rivals. Her solution was to rely on foreign mercenaries, but this proved to be an unstable solution. Not only did they lack training, but their loyalty was always in question. Foreigners could defect. They could be bought off by rivals, or they could simply sail away after the war ended. They become calcified rules that only serve to prevent progress. Take the British East India Company, for example. Once the premier trading institution in the world, the company stagnated. It failed to innovate because it was trapped by its own rules and traditions. The result was the slow but inevitable decline of British power. Sparta's failure to innovate was less dramatic, but no less consequential. They failed to create the institutions necessary to support a larger and more effective navy. The result was that they paid top dollar for low-quality ships that broke in bad weather. A truly flexible institution would have been able to anticipate these problems and address them before they became catastrophic. In the modern era, we see navies large and small master this balance all the time. Think of the mighty Chinese Navy that uses small attack craft to harass and blockade rivals, or the tiny Singaporean Navy that punches above its weight thanks to smart procurement. And if focus on high quality over high quantity, sometimes you need to change your institutions. As the largest in the Mediterranean, it required a huge investment of manpower and money. Even with the support of her allies, Sparta struggled to keep up with her commitments. The key problem was the trireme. Triremes were fast, maneuverable warships propelled by 3 ranks of oarsmen. They were incredibly labor-intensive, requiring at least 200 oarsmen per ship. Warships were not like battleships where you were less dependent on crew skill. Your ship was faster, more protected and packed more punch than your enemy, but triremes relied on speed and skill. You won battles by maneuvering your ships to the right position, and then overwhelming your enemy with your superior numbers. This required both individual and collective skill. Oarsmen needed to know how to row properly, but they also needed to coordinate with the other crews on board, and that required training and experience. A green crew could lose a battle against a more experienced one even if their ships were equal. In every other regard, storms, shipwrecks, bad navigation, and incompetent allies nearly sunk the whole effort. For a people who gloried in martial strength and skill, this was humiliating. Storms battered the Spartan ships, breaking anchors and rigging. Storms were rare in the eastern Mediterranean, but as Agesilaus discovered, the waters around Sicily were notoriously unpredictable, and soon after leaving port, several warships sank. Then the Sicilian contingent got lost in a storm and never made it to Sparta either. Discouraged, Agesilaus pressed on, arriving eventually at the Peloponnese with only 3/4 of his ships still intact. But before either side can get started, the Spartans are hit with a political crisis. King Agesilaus, the warrior king, was campaigning in Asia Minor when he received news that his cousin, the Eurypontid king, had died. They had eliminated most of their rivals, conquered new lands and consolidated their power. But we are going to see that their victory was very costly. Desiring to end his campaign on a high note, and knowing that any rival could fill the power vacuum in Sparta, Agesilaus sailed home immediately. He brought his fleet with him. She drew her prestige and strength from her elite hoplite force. Men who fought shoulder to shoulder, perfectly drilled and coordinated, invincible in close quarters. Naval warfare was a different kind of contest altogether. You weren't judged by the quality of your warriors, but by the size and skill of your rowing force. While Sparta did have a tradition of seamanship, it was nothing compared to their prowess on land, and this hurt them during the war with Athens. Their navy was woefully inadequate and played second fiddle to their army. This forced them to adopt the tactics of their enemy, becoming more dependent on fast maneuvering ships and boarding tactics. They lacked the infrastructure and traditions needed to support this kind of fleet, and their attempt to catch up nearly cost them everything, which might sound odd because Sparta wasn't known for its sea power. In fact, their navy had only become relevant in the last generation. Their army was their glory, the reason they were able to dominate the Peloponnese and control the Helot population. They discovered just how much their land power was holding them back. A large fleet of fast triremes that could project power across the Aegean. Sparta's fleet was small, only 260 ships strong, barely enough to protect their overseas territories. But the Spartans were on the cusp of great power. If they could control the entire Aegean, their rivals would be cut off from overseas trade, and Sparta would be the dominant power in Greece. All Agesilaus had to do was survive the voyage home and hold off any pretenders to the throne. They also learned that sometimes the best way to advance your power is not to build bigger and stronger ships, but to build different ones. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to talk about some lessons that we can learn from the deep. My name is Anonymous. I am a U.S. Army combat veteran, and I run a channel. Now, if you want to learn more about history or current events through the lens of someone who was there, fighting alongside real soldiers, well, then you should check out my channel. I am a historian, and I am here to help you understand history, so you can be better prepared for the future. You don't want to miss anything, so hit subscribe now and never miss an upload. The year is 400 for BC. It has been 8 years since the start of the Peloponnesian War, and it has been 4 years since Athens fell. Agesilaus had inherited a navy from his uncle, the previous king, but this navy was not like the Athenian navy. As the fleet sailed west toward home, they were joined by a few dozen allied vessels, including a contingent from her ally, Sicily. Spartan victories on land allowed them to secure their dominance in the Peloponnese and gain new allies, but also to exact revenge on their enemies. Yet looking at the problem from another angle, Sparta had done exactly what they set out to do. The first lesson we can learn from Sparta's voyages is the importance of institutional flexibility. Sparta, remember, was a land power. Institutions are the rules and norms that govern behavior. A second lesson we can learn from Sparta's navy is the tension between tradition and technology. Sparta's navy was expensive. This created a tension between tradition and technology. We see this tension playing out again and again in the navies of today, which brings us to the final lesson, and that is to ask what might have been. What if Sparta had opened up her navy to foreigners and non-citizens? In the end, Agesilaus sailed back to Sparta to find a kingdom on the verge of civil war. We'll never know what might have been, but we can say that Sparta was on the cusp of greatness. Which brings us to the final question. Today we're going to do something different. You are now in command of an Athenian trireme during the Peloponnesian War. Your orders are simple. The Spartans have decided that they want to put some troops ashore near here, and they've sent a fleet to try to cover their landing party. The Athenians under the command of the great general Demosthenes have decided to stop them. Stay close to your admiral and do whatever he tells you. So let's get into it. Trying to protect the other ships while also keeping out of range of the Spartan hoplites. Others don't fare so well. You hear the crunch of bones and the gurgling of blood as the rocks and the waves claim their victims. The Spartan hoplites on the beach start to lose their nerve. Seeing their comrades die such horrible deaths, they begin to drift back into the water, trying to get away from the carnage. He wants you to use your oars to make your ship go backwards. Every night the Spartans would send a ship full of soldiers, and every night the Athenians would burn that ship. Hoplites are elite soldiers. He believes the Spartans have something new planned. They've taken to sending to ships at once. Could this be it? Are you about to become the centerpiece of a Spartan victory? And he thinks they may be planning to trap your trireme between them. He wants you to row closer to the shore, right into the path of the enemy longships. At first, you resist. You don't want to become sitting ducks, but your admiral is adamant. Your muscles scream in protest, but you obey. You drop your oars into the water and turn to face the oncoming longships. They've been rowing and fighting for 3 days now and haven't slept. The Athenians, on the other hand, are fresh, eager to prove themselves. The Athenian ships smash the Spartan longships and force the remaining ships to flee. The Spartans are defeated again. You see them standing shoulder to shoulder, defiantly waving their spears at the Athenians. After an hour, the Athenian ships pull back and sail away. They'll be back tomorrow, though. This isn't over yet. This time, though, there's no joy in victory. He says he has a plan, but he doesn't tell you what it is. They want to join the fight, but they can't. They brought food and water for the hoplites, supplies that the soldiers can't get through the blockade. But the Corinthians have thought of that, too. Suddenly, your trireme strikes something in the water. You see steam rising from it, and hear the hiss of air being forced from a wound. Deep beneath the water, the earth is boiling. A volcano has erupted beneath the sea. You feel the impact shake your ship. What was that? Did you hit a rock? Is it an ambush? You paddle toward it, desperate to get inside. It's cramped, but it'll keep you alive. You think of your family and friends back in Athens. Will they ever know what happened here? Or will you be another forgotten casualty of the war? Their ships are deeper in the water than you realized. They turn with you, matching your speed. You watch in amazement as the women distribute the supplies to the hoplites. These women aren't helpless. They're strong, determined to help their men. If they abandon their posts, then the whole fleet could be at risk. You can see the same fear in the eyes of your fellow sailors. You share their desire to fight, but you all know it would be a mistake. Your job is done. You turn your trireme around and join the others in sailing back to Athens. Those are Athenian triremes, but you've never seen them before. You realize what's happening. Your admiral has lured the Spartan longships away from the main fleet with the promise of easy pickings. Every day, the Athenian ships harass the Spartans, preventing them from escaping. But the hoplites refuse to surrender. They would rather starve than give up. Now the rest of the Athenian ships will attack, and the Spartan hoplites will be unable to defend themselves. Life at sea is unpredictable. You turn around and see a Spartan warship bearing down on you. It's bigger than any Athenian ship. It moves faster, too. The Athenian triremes are fast, but they can't outrun the Corinthian warships. The Corinthians use their larger ships to cut off the escape route. Soon, you're trapped. The Corinthians have joined the Spartans, and you're in trouble. Instead, you hear shouts in Spartan and then silence. The two longships have passed you by. They've made it to the beach and anchored there. Then a gangplank drops between them, and they begin unloading soldiers. Their oars flash in the firelight as they row hard for the beach. Soon enough, they'll be within spear range, and all you'll be able to do is wait and die. You'll never know what the next day might bring. You turn to look back at the rest of the fleet. But today, the sea has been kind to the Athenians, so they're able to fend off these attacks for a time. But soon they're swept away, pulled by the current and the waves. Many people thought that Athens would be at a disadvantage soon enough. The relief fleet will arrive, and then you and your fellow sailors will have to fight all over again. And this time, things will be much worse, because it lacked the manpower and resources to maintain a navy as large as that of Sparta. But Athenian ingenuity and the skill of her sailors have overcome these obstacles. Now, thanks to the defeat at Pylos, Athens has captured a key piece of real estate, the fortified island of Sphacteria, along with 300 Spartan soldiers who retreated there rather than surrender to the Athenians, forced to swim ever further from the safety of the beach. Some of them never make it. You see their heads pop up in the water, waving their arms, calling for help, only to disappear again, leaving only the ripples and their dying screams to mark where they were, turning their ships into nimble dance partners gliding back and forth. You can see the soldiers preparing to disembark on the other ship, their bronze helmets gleaming in the sun. They carry their swords and their round tower shields, ready to defend themselves as well as their fellow sailors. You're still patrolling the waters off the coast of Sphacteria. 3 days ago, the Spartan relief fleet arrived, but they were too late. The bridge leading to the island had been destroyed and the Spartans were trapped. The Athenian navy did what they could to stop the Spartan ships from landing troops, but the Spartans were persistent. Day after day, they sent longships ashore, trying to ferry troops across. Each time, the Athenians smashed those longships. This will allow another trireme to move closer to the shoreline and get within spear range of the Spartan landing party. That other trireme has a ramp set up on its starboard side. It will use this to disembark soldiers who will attempt to rout the Spartan troops on the shore. Their long spears can reach quite far from the shore, but not 200 meters. As you watch, the other ships move further out to sea, bringing more of the Spartan long spears into range. This is dangerous. One of them, having lost its anchor, is drifting dangerously close to the jagged rocks just offshore. The crew struggles to bring it about, but it's too late. The ship strikes the rocks, splitting open. Men jump into the water, desperately trying to swim clear of the wreckage as it smolders and sinks. If those spears start finding their marks, then many Athenian sailors will die before the landing party even reaches the beach. Our first engagement occurs in 425 BCE off the coast of the small town of Pylos. Your admiral maneuvers your ship close to the coastline. Demosthenes calls for your trireme to do a little dance. You turn your ship round and begin paddling backwards, beating against the waves. All around you, the other triremes follow suit, but suddenly the Spartan ships start to panic. Some of those men are strong swimmers, and they manage to reach the shore safely. And that's when the Athenian soldiers hit them with their spears. Eventually, all the Spartan troops are either dead or swimming hard for the beach. When the war began, but you can already tell that the Spartans won't accept this defeat, because now the stakes have been raised. Then 2 days ago, the Athenian generals had an inspiration. They would set fire to the longships. Tonight, though, something is different. You can feel it in your bones. Your admiral watches the shore anxiously. Just after sunset, 2 longships pull away from the Spartan fleet and begin rowing towards the shore. You feel your heart pound in your chest. No. Your admiral shouts orders. The longships are close now, so close you can see the scowling faces of their crews. Your admiral's voice rings out above the splashing of oars and the cries of the men. He wants you to stop rowing. You brace yourself for the spears, but they never come. You watch in disbelief as the Spartans prepare to land. Where are the Athenians? Where is your admiral's plan? The answer comes swiftly. You don't recognize those ships. There are too many Athenians to fight. The Spartan hoplites are quickly overwhelmed. They fight bravely, but they're tiring. As the battle rages, the men in your trireme start to panic. The battle ends soon enough. You watch as the Athenian ships sail closer to Sphacteria, hoping to force the Spartans to surrender. But the hoplites refuse. It doesn't last long. The siege of Sphacteria drags on for weeks. One day, you see something strange. A group of Spartan women arrive on the island. Your trireme comes under attack. Hopes for an easy victory are dashed. Desperately, you turn for the shore, hoping the shallow water will protect you. This is it. You're about to die. Before you can think of a third question, you feel the water temperature change. The water around you turns warm. In the confusion, you see a life raft bobbing on the surface. What do you think? Leave me a comment below to let me know. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and check out my podcast. Thanks for watching. See you next time. When it comes to sea battles between Spartans and Persians, most people think of one thing. Thermopylae, 200 and the Spartans have assembled a navy to fight against the Persians. That is so they can join up with the main Athenian fleet coming from the Aegean. The allies divide themselves into 2 squadrons. Who thinks that his fleet is big enough to stand toe-to-toe with the Persians and win glory for itself? This one is dripping with sarcasm. The Corinthians claim that the Spartans and Athenians are the ones who won. The Corinthians wanted credit for beating back the Persians. It happened again at the Battle of the Straits of Artemisium in 479 BCE. The year is 479 BCE, and the combined fleet of Spartans, Corinthians and Athenians are preparing for action against the Persians. The Spartans have 150 ships, the Corinthians have 100, and the Athenians have 200, for a total of 450. Once again, the wind shifts direction and blows the Corinthians away from the Spartans, so the Spartans join in and the Persians are soon defeated. Afterwards, the victors pursue the fleeing Persians, destroying many more of their ships, and so the battle ends. Without their promised support, the Corinthians curse the Spartans for abandoning them and charge headlong into the Persians. Well, the Spartans did fight at the Battle of Thermopylae. The outcome was already decided. By the time the Spartans arrived, the Persians had already won. So it seemed better to me to look at 2 battles, where the Spartans actually had a chance to prove themselves. In both of these battles, they had to learn to control their natural instincts and temper their courage with strategy and discipline. And they learned that sometimes you have to sit back and let your opponents exhaust themselves before you strike. In both battles, they also learned the importance of logistics. While hoplite valor was important, it wasn't enough by itself to win naval battles. Coordination and strategy were just as important. Again, the Spartans stand by and watch as the Corinthians endanger themselves. For the second time, they wait to see what happens, and if things go south for the Corinthians, they'll be ready to pick up the pieces. They meet up with the Persian fleet at the Straits of Artemisium. This time, though, the Persians only have about 100 ships, and the Spartans are eager to get into the fight, finally proving themselves as seafarers. But the Spartans and Athenians claimed that they didn't do anything. The Spartans especially felt this way. Who are the best supporters a channel could ask for? Hoplites help make all of these videos possible, and if you want to join their ranks, you can check the links below. If not, that's alright. Remember, a Spartan agoge is open to all. That is the education of a Spartan warrior, and that means you. Until next time, stay safe out there. A strong west wind has blown them away from the rest of the allied fleet. They find themselves engaged with nearly the entire Persian fleet. Now, the Corinthians needed help, but the Spartans refused to come to their rescue. You see, the Spartans had learned something during the previous battle. The Corinthians were great at finding glory, but not necessarily winning battles. During the previous battle, the Corinthians had sailed directly into the mouth of the Persian trap, and if it hadn't been for the Spartans, the Corinthians would have been annihilated, because the battle wasn't exactly a resounding victory for them. They will follow along, but only if the Corinthians promise to hold back and not charge directly into the Persians. The Corinthians agree, and the battle commences. The Spartans sail slowly toward the Persians, poking at them with their long spears. They keep a safe distance from the enemy ships and never allow the Persians to board their vessels. The Spartans are masters of logistics. They always stay far enough away from the Persians that if they need to, they can easily row away. At the same time, they poke at the enemy with their spears, inflicting damage but never allowing anyone to board their ships. This is a far cry from their land battles where hand-to-hand fighting is the norm. Here the Spartans have to master the art of hitting and running. They watched from afar as the Corinthians charged into the Persians and then retreated. When things got tough, as far as they were concerned, they were watching a bunch of braggarts risk themselves when they could have just stayed back and let the Persians exhaust themselves. The Spartans also noticed how once the Persians saw that the Corinthians were vulnerable in the rear, they stopped attacking them, and if they hadn't done that, the Corinthians might have been utterly routed. So they gave the Corinthians credit for winning the battle, but decided that they weren't going to try anything like that themselves. He tells them that the whole Spartan fleet should be ashamed of itself, that they were too scared to fight the Persians. He says they sat there drinking their wine and having their fling, meaning their fling, the sex slaves that the Spartans brought with them on their fleet. To say that Ephialtes is unhappy about being ignored by his kings is an understatement, but it does make for some great logs. Ephialtes wrote those logs while he was hiding in a temple on the island of Chios. If he'd lived through the battle, that is, according to Plutarch, he died in the battle, but according to Ephorus, he did survive. Either way, he's still bitter. Unfortunately for him, he's only got one ship, and he doesn't have any hoplites with him. Instead, he has archers and slingsmen, who excel at shooting down enemy sailors, but not so good in close quarters fighting. The Persian ships surround him, and soon he is forced to retreat. He sends a letter back to the Spartan kings begging them to come help him. In his letter, he writes, "By Zeus, I am being destroyed, both I and my comrades, for we cannot endure any longer." In another, he says, "You must come quickly, for we are fighting hard and we are but few." He gets no reply. The Corinthians take the right wing, and the Spartans and Athenians are on the left. When the battle begins, the Corinthians immediately set about chasing glory. They charge into the thick of the fighting, leaving the Spartans and Athenians somewhat behind. This suits the Spartans just fine. They watch from afar how the Corinthians engage the Persians and learn their tactics. You see, the Spartans didn't have a navy because they spent most of their time fighting land battles, so their admirals had little experience commanding ships at sea. So instead, they sent out scouts ahead of their fleet to watch the other Greeks. And now they are watching the Corinthians fight, because the Spartans want to know what they are doing when they get into the fight themselves. As they sail north, they come upon the northern entrance to the Straits of Artemisium, where the Persian fleet is waiting for them. It numbers around 200 ships, and the Allies have around 180. The Allies anchor their ships offshore, then march their troops onto Mount Artemisium, which towers over the strait. There they await the coming battle. They are fighting alongside the Athenians and the Corinthians. The Corinthian fleet is led by the brothers Cleisthenes and Aristocrates, while the Spartan fleet is under the command of the two cousins, Eurybithus and Lysander. The Athenians are also led by two men, the Ephors, Demaratus and Calanges. Their job is to babysit the Spartans, making sure that they don't do anything stupid, like maybe charging into the middle of the Persian fleet all on their own. 300 Spartan warriors holding off a much larger Persian army for 3 days before being betrayed, and all killed except for one. But that isn't really a sea battle unless you count the Persian navy. That showed up late on the 3rd day and killed the one Spartan who was left alive. But we aren't going to talk about that today. Instead, we are going to look at 2 other times that Spartans went to war with the Persians on the sea. The first of these is the Battle of Mount Artemisium in 480 BCE, and the second is the Battle of the Straits of Artemisium in 479 BCE. This is Sparta, and this is ancient warfare. The year is 480 BCE. The allied fleet is sailing north from the Isthmus of Corinth to the Hellespont. Soon enough, the Persians attack. One Spartan ship, though, is too eager to jump into the fray. It's commanded by Ephialtes of Gythium. After the battle, Ephialtes writes another letter to the kings. What makes it even more bitter for Ephialtes is that after the battle, and speaking of the Corinthians, that wasn't the last time they tried to steal the glory for themselves. Once again, the Corinthians charge into the fray, but this time they run into trouble. But now the Spartans are willing to let the Corinthians take the lead. And just as they are beginning to get the hang of it, as the battle rages, the Spartans see that the Corinthians aren't in any real danger. In fact, they are winning. So why did I pick these 2 battles? Speaking of hoplite valor, I want to thank all of my hoplites, especially my ultra hoplites.